ex nihilo, that before creation, nothing existed. The question is, what is nothing? If you want to visualize nothing or to relate to nothing, what is nothing? Anything we're able to visualize or relate to in any context, that's part of creation. Vacuum is creation. Ex nihilo means when we say nothing, it's not within our frame of reference, even to relate to understand what nothing is. Now, this is a very difficult concept, which is Rambam and Rav Chaim Volozhin, based on the Zohar, says it's, if you think about it, it could lead you to not a good place. Hashem is echod. God is one. What is the meaning? God is one. We say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem echod. Echod means much more that there's no other power other than God. The concept of echod means nothing exists outside of God. Nothing. So somehow, because if anything exists outside of God, that means God is not infinite. There's a beginning, there's an end. So we say God is echod, mean God is absolute, the only, nothing exists outside of himself. So if that's the case, where's there a place for creation? If nothing exists outside of God, so how do we exist within the context that nothing exists outside of him? So somehow, the way he created this creation, that somehow humanly, intellectually, it's not reconcilable. There's a place for us to exist, an existence to exist, although he exists simultaneously on an infinite level. So the question is, what does that mean? So when we speak about before creation, nothing exists means the only thing that existed was God himself. That whatever that existence is, nothing existed other than God, and God somehow willed that something else should exist despite the fact that he's infinite. How do you reconcile it? It's impossible to reconcile the two. This is something that even the greatest angel cannot relate to, cannot understand. So when we speak about ex nihilo, what existed before existence? Only God himself. What is God? God is infinite. There's no beginning, there's no end. There's no frame of reference for that. As you can't visualize God, because there's no beginning, there's no end. He's absolutely infinite. So we speak about Bereshis Bara Elohim. In the beginning, God created heaven and earth. That means that's the first time that God willed that something should come into being together with, although he himself is here, absolute, that somehow he brought about an existence which is not contradictory to him being infinite. Now, what is the meaning of the word Elohim? Elohim means Almighty. In the beginning, Almighty created heaven and earth. That means every power that exists within existence exists within him, and therefore he willed whatever is even unimaginable to be brought into existence. There's a word from the Maharal of Prague based on the Pasuk in Tehillim, Mi yimal gvuras Hashem yashmi kol tiloso. These are the words of David HaMelech. Mi yimal gvuras Hashem, who could utter the power of God, yashmi kol tiloso, to be able to make known all his praise. So he explains it this way. If a person, let's say we see something, whatever it may be, you have no idea in terms of to appreciate even what you see. What allowed that to come into being. I'll give you an example. You have a microscope. If you wouldn't have a microscope, you wouldn't be able to see the makeup the cells, the atom, the molecules, you'd see nothing. You know nothing. And even when you see it, what do you understand? So that's mi yamal gvuras Hashem. Who could utter the praises of God? Yashmi kol tiloso. Is it possible even to make known all this tila? Why? Because there's so much we don't even see, even on the most superficial level. Do we know what's in the depths of the ocean? Do we know what's on the far reaches of the earth? Do we know what's in the galaxies, in the heavens? We have no idea. Firstly, what we see, we don't even understand what we see. And there's so much, even at the most superficial level, we're not even aware that even it exists. These are words of David HaMelech. Mi yimalel gvuras Hashem. Who could even utter the power of God? Yashmiya kol tiloso, to make known all his praise, because there's so much we don't even see. Not we don't understand, we don't even know it even exists. What we see, we don't appreciate. We don't even realize and understand the depths and the various levels of understanding of what we see. And in addition, there's so much endless that we don't even know exists because we don't even see it. So when we speak about Bereshit, wait a second. When we speak of Bereshit Bar Elohim, in the beginning, God created, Almighty created heaven and earth. Almighty means whatever is included in that heaven and earth at every level, at the most subatomic level, whatever it may be, that's within his power. Because it only exists because he's the Almighty that brought that existence into existence. There's a Sefarno in this week's, right on this word Elohim. We know that we say at Kriyas Yamsuf, we said, Mi chamocha be'elim Hashem. Who is the equivalent of you, Bo'elim? Who are the Elim? The Elim are the angels. El means power. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is also called Kael, because he's a power. But the angels are also called Elim, meaning who is as great as you among all the angels? All the angels combined are not what you are. God is the Almighty. Elohim means, he says, the word Elohim is the plural of the word Kael. That's Elohim. And that's why Elohim means Almighty. And Almighty, we'd even understand what the word Almighty means, as I just explained. Because mi yamal gvuras Hashem yashmiya kol tiloso. Who could utter the power of God to make known all his praise, because we're not even aware of what even exists. You know, I always mention the first time they sent up the Hubble telescope, the first photographs that came back was 1 million miles of space dust. So what are the galaxies? What's the extent? We can't even relate to what 1 million miles, what that is. We can't. So that's mi yashmiya kol tiloso. Do we know what exists, in the Amazon jungle? There's certain locations, this earth, that no human being ever walked on those locations. I'm not even talking about in space. Even on the terrestrial level. There's certain tribes that we don't even know that exist. They're tucked away, hidden in the jungles. We don't even know they exist, but they do exist. No, the famous Gemara, the Gemara says in Brachos that there was a certain Amora, he began uttering the praises of Hashem. We say, Hakel, Hagodl, Hagiba, Vanora. And he kept going, one after another, and then he stopped. So when he stopped, the Amora said to him, his Rebbe said to him, he says, why did you stop? He says, once you start, you can't stop. In terms of quantifying God himself, Hashem identified himself as, I am Elokei Avram, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov. I'm Kael, Hagodl, Hagiv, Hanora, because we find in the Torah, that's the way Moshe Rabbeinu had depicted God. So those appellations, or those references, to that degree we're permitted to say. But once you start trying to articulate and delineate his ability, you can't stop. Because if you stop means the stopping, what you didn't say, evidently means he doesn't possess those abilities, those qualities. So that's what he says. And he says, because it's mi yamal gvuras Hashem yashmiya kol tiloso. That's exactly what David is saying. Because not what you don't say evidently indicates he doesn't possess that. So once you start, you can't stop. And since you can't stop, you're not permitted even to start. And, I always mention the Dum and the Magid, as he explains everything with an allegory, with a moshel. There was a king who was being installed, being inaugurated, and all the ministers came to sing his praises with a gift. And one person comes and he says, the king himself has a crooked nose. And immediately the king becomes infuriated. He says, take the man out immediately, have him killed. So he says, but before we execute you, I want to just understand what exactly was even the consideration of saying what you said. That you understood it would cost you your life. He says, you don't understand. Your Majesty, my praise is greater than all their praises, because whatever they said about you, you're wise, you're handsome, you're powerful, you're this, whatever you may be, but that they didn't say indicates you don't possess those other qualities which may exist out there. When I said you have a crooked nose, that means that's the only shortcoming you have. That every conceivable ability and praise, you possess all that. So therefore, my praise is greater than all their praises. So when they praised you, it falls short of what you may be beyond that. My praise, by saying you have a crooked nose, that means anything other than that, you're perfect. So lahavdil, when we speak of miyamal gviras Hashem yashmir kol tiloso, Almighty, once you try to explain what Almighty means, you can't stop. Because we don't even imagine or can conceive or fathom what Almighty means. So this is the introduction, Bereshis Bar Elohim. In the beginning, Elohim created. Created is ex nihilo. We can't, if God is absolutely perfect, infinite, nothing exists outside of him. That means pre this moment, nothing existed. Nothing means something we can't imagine, fathom, or even relate to. What did he create? Eisa Shemayim V'Soretz. Heaven and earth. That's what he created. So Rashi cites the famous Chazal, Midrash. The word Bereshis doesn't only mean in the beginning. The Beis alludes to for the purpose. For the purpose of Rashis, with the objective of Rashis, God created heaven and earth. I always say, if a person believes in a creator, then we could talk about there's a purpose in creation. Nothing's random. If he created, that means there was an intent. We have to figure out what the intent is. But if there is no creator, we say things just came about randomly. No, the Big Bang Theory. There was somehow an explosion, and a dynamic began, whether it started with the one cell, or things happened immediately, and it evolved over billions of years. But that means it's random. But nobody ever figured out, even the science ever said, there's a Big Bang Theory. But what caused that Big Bang? Something had to cause it. That means there is an origin of existence. There is a creator. Once you say there's creator, there is a creator, there's a purpose, there's an objective. Because why did he create? And we have to try to figure out why did he create. But there is an objective. And the Torah tells us what is that objective. In the first opening word of the Torah, B'shvil Reishis Bar Elohim Yisrael V'Soretz. God created this nearly infinite existence, terrestrial, celestial, for one purpose, for the sake of Torah, which is referred to as Reishis, the chosen, and for the sake of the Jewish people, who are also referred to as Reishis, as Rashi cites the Chazal. That is the objective. So before we start speaking about the process and what it is and how it evolved, sequentially speaking, let's first talk about what's the objective of this existence. The Creator created, Elohim, the Almighty created. Why did he create? What is the objective? For Torah, and for what? And for the Jewish people, who are the only ones who have relevance to be able to fulfill that Torah. Which initially, as we'll discuss later, was Adam in terms of his spiritual makeup, in terms of his soul, the composite of the physical, spiritual, how they interacted and interplayed between the two of them. Ultimately, we took that position because he forfeited that position as a result of eating of the tree of knowledge. He putrefied himself in a way which he couldn't correct it. That's the story with Adam. But there was an objective. You give a person every potential, every ability, and God forbid, he jumps off a cliff. You may have all the potential, but you ruined it. You gave it up. You forfeited it. You destroyed your life. Adam destroyed his potential. He was disenfranchised. It was up for grabs, as the Ramchal speaks about, a number of generations, and the one who succeeded in meriting to take that position in the potential was Avram Avinu, because the world was devoid of God's presence, and Avram Avinu came to recognize that, and not only did he recognize it, he espoused it, and he brought tens of thousands of people to that belief, which is ultimately the objective of creation, that even the Noahide should recognize that there's a master. And that's, as the Gemara tells us in Brachos, which we studied, that the first person to refer to Hashem as Adon, as master, was Avram Avinu. He was the first human being ever to, and because of that, therefore he merited to be the one that his children and he himself merited to be classified as Odom. Atem Kurim Odom, V'hem lo Kurim Odom. We assume the position of Adam, his potential, but the nations of the world don't have that potential. They have a whole different function. Not initially the original intent of creation, which is, and this is already alluded to Bereshis Bara Elokim, for the sake of Torah, which is Rashis, the chosen, the choicest, and for the chosen, who are referring to the Klal Yisrael. Mark, you wanted to say something.